And well, we got our recording started. There we go. Let me start again. Welcome to our Troy Interfaith Group Martin Luther King Day service or gathering. It's so good to have all of you with us, whether you are a longtime member of the Troy Interfaith Group or whether this is your first event. Welcome. Whether you are watching this live or recorded on YouTube, welcome. It's so good to have you all here. We have just a few things of not just housekeeping, but a moment of celebration. We do want to let you know of the event of the flyer that I had up is what will be happening next month. It is the February 7th at 7 p.m., the same time as tonight. We will be with the Oakland Literacy Council. And so read more about that. I hope to see you there if you are here, and feel free to ask any questions at the end if you want to know more about that event. But as we get started, we want to tonight celebrate our previous convener, Ed Chezik, who has graciously, you are on to new things, some very eventful things. And so we want to take a moment and to celebrate you. We looked it up and I believe it was 6 years that you have been a convener of Troy Interfaith Group. And so we want to celebrate you. And so as I understand, you have a few remarks for us.
Only about 2.5 hours worth. So with that, I will get started here. Tonight, thank you very much, Pastor Chris. Tonight is the last time that I shall hold the title of convener of the Troy Interfaith Group. For over 6 years, I have had the honor of either standing before you or being one of these squares that appears during our Zoom meetings, which we've initiated due to the COVID pandemic. Any remarks that I make tonight will not do justice to the joy that I have felt while in this role. The event in Texas over this past weekend bring to the foreground the importance of what TIG is all about. We must remain a light that removes the empty, discordant voices of hate, anger, and division. We have gathered so many times in a diversity of voices, attending to one another's supplication to the divine. We've prayed for an end of COVID. We've raised our voices together in thanksgiving. And most importantly of all, we have together prayed for world peace. Dr. King once said that he had seen the mountaintop. And so, I implore you all to commit in the holy names which you use to call upon the source of life, to take one another's hand and walk together to this holy place where peace permeates like air, where peace permeates like the air of flowers blossoming in spring. Let us own the charge to build a world of loving kindness. Pastor Chris from Northminster Church, as you've already seen, will be taking over the role of convener. Her unique energy and skills will be a true inspiration to all of us. I will still be a part of the TIG family, where I will be serving on the board. I would like to thank you all for letting me be part of this family. Pray for me as I will be praying for your successes in all of your laudable undertakings. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
So a moment ago, Ed asked me how good my Yiddish was, which is terrible. But I do know one phrase. And so if you have a mug of something, I have my mug of tea next to me. I invite you to grab yours and wish Ed a wonderful Mazel Tov. And thank you so much from the depths of our heart for being our convener and leading us. Thank you, Mazel Tov. Just to to fill us in. Do you have plans for what's next with all your free time?
All right, so I am currently enrolled with Olive, the DTLI. I'm enrolled in a 2-year program with the Davening Leadership Training Institute with Olive. I'm halfway through that. I will also be relatively soon starting a course in Biblical Hebrew where I shall be improving my Biblical Hebrew. After I improve my Biblical Hebrew, I will be applying to one of 2 places to study for rabbinical ordination.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So,
if that isn't enough, Diana.
all right. So Mazel Tov to your continued journey.
Thank you.
Now, I have the distinct pleasure now to introduce our speaker for tonight. It is Reverend George Houston. He has many titles and wears many hats, and we are so blessed to have him here. He is the Assistant Director of the Love Detroit Initiative, the President of Troy People Concerned, a former pastor of Stonehaven Free Methodist Church, board member to the Clawson Board of Administration, graduate of Fuller Theological Seminary, and currently, in his own words, a pastor at large. So we are so blessed that the at large portion of that includes us tonight. Welcome.
Well, I want to say thank you so very much for inviting me here. Good evening to everyone on this Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Again, my name is George Houston, and as she said, I'm a pastor in the Free Methodist Church, and I'm also the president of the board of Troy People Concerned. And I want to thank Reverend Christina Hallam and the Troy Interfaith Council for this invitation. But I also want to thank the people of Troy for their support of Troy People Concerned. Now, that's an organization that supports the Troy residents in time of need with assistance, information, and referrals. So thank you for the support that you have been to that organization through the years. Tonight, I want to talk to the community and anybody that is on board about the beloved community, and particularly about creating tension in the beloved community. And I know that might seem like, well, why do you want to talk about that? Well, we'll get into it a little bit. Now, I'm originally from the Seattle area, and where I'm from, there's this one great mountain. It's called Mount Rainier. Now, this mountain rises over all of the other mountains. It just towers over them. Well, people are like that. Some people are like a mountain in that they will rise over their peer. They just tower over the rest. Martin Luther King Jr. was such a man. And I remember as a child, I looked at King, I saw him on the news broadcast, and I was amazed and I was awed that in his marches and in his protests, he would be assaulted, he would be bloodied, he would, on occasion, he was stabbed, he was, hit upside his head with bricks and bleeding, and he's human. He's not a robot, he's got real feelings. And I know that he really probably, just like us, he would have wanted to retaliate. He would have wanted to hit someone or to swear at them, but he refused to do that. He towered over others in his response. So as we gather here together today and consider this great man and his legacy, I believe that today we really have 2 options. One, we can join hands and sing Kumbaya and have a feel-good moment while things like what happened in Texas continue to take place and the world goes to hell in a handbasket. Or we can commit ourselves to addressing the ills that confront our society. And I really trust that you are here for the latter. So tonight I've come to talk to you, but not to provide really answers so much as questions. I do not think there's anything that is beyond our ability to accomplish when we unite around good ideals. So I have three questions that I want to address. And the first one that I want to address is, what are the issues today which diminish the dignity of individuals that we are reluctant to address? I say that because we need to address them. Now, I remember about 10 years ago, a white pastor friend of mine expressed to me that he didn't really think that there were still racial issues in America. He felt like we were in a post-racial America. After all, we had elected a Black president, laws had been passed, and so many things had changed. But I let him know that there are still many who were experiencing the impact of racism. Now, since that time, we're seeing some of these racial issues flare again after the deaths of unarmed Black men and boys in a variety of locations that gave rise to the Black Lives Matter and other protests. Now, I know that's probably old news to most of us here, but I just want to say this to point out that a lot of real issues out there that need to be addressed often are overlooked unless somebody is experiencing that plight. They get ignored. People just don't see them. Now, I'm talking about things like the plight and treatment of immigrants, the status and the abuse of women, the Native Americans, disparities in the administration of justice, wealth distribution, healthcare, income disparities, education disparities, gun violence. I could really go on and on. I think some of these have been magnified by the pandemic. But I point these out, and I just want to say that we all have a unique vantage point on these issues depending on where we live. And we must each decide what causes we're willing to give ourselves to. But we should also hope to have allies in our efforts to obtain liberty and justice for all. Now, the term that is used for these allies, I like to think of as the beloved community. Now, there are barriers that often go unnoticed by most people. But let's say if you're in a wheelchair and you get to the stairs and you can't go up, you not only notice the barrier, but it actually hinders you from entering. So if you notice barriers, you may be that visionary who can also provide solutions. So what are the issues today which diminish the dignity of individuals that we are reluctant to address? Well, though we may enjoy life and experience much that is good, let us not forget those who are on the margins, who live beneath their dignity. When addressing iniquities, remember that systems and institutions tend to be more unjust than the individuals. So you may be able to get buy-in, for instance, from a teacher, but not from the school. Maybe from an official, but not from the head of the administration. So just keep that in mind. But the second question that I want to ask you is, who is in your circle? And what is keeping others out of your circle? Now I say circles because we tend to draw a circle around us that includes some, but excludes others. For instance, my circle may include those of my race or my religion or my social or economic status. By default, we have people who we consider to be insiders and outsiders, friend or foe, a national, an immigrant. So who are the people that you consider your allies? Now, King desired that his circle would be an expanding circle. It would be an expanding beloved community. King was not the first person to embrace the concept of the beloved community. Philosopher and theologian Josiah Royce, who founded the Fellowship of Reconciliation, he coined the term beloved community in the early 20th century. But it was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a member of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, who popularized the term. And he invested it with a deeper meaning. In Dr. King's sermon on Gandhi, he explained why the beloved community must be the end goal of all activism for both strategic and moral reasons. The aftermath of nonviolence, he said, is the creation of the beloved community, so that when the battle's over, a new relationship comes into being between the oppressed and the oppressor. The way of acquiescence leads to moral and spiritual suicide. The way of violence leads to bitterness in the survivors and brutality in the destroyers. But the way of nonviolence leads to redemption and the creation of the beloved community. So King believed that his faith, his religion, it had to be practical or else it was worthless. And so the beloved community is the outward working of his faith, of our desire for a world in which dwells righteousness and peace. Now, King deeply believed in something that really almost sounds silly, that almost sounds trite, but he really believed in the power of redemptive love. From Dr. King's standpoint, anger is part of a process that includes anger, forgiveness, redemption, and love. Because if you only have anger, then you will be paralyzed. You can't do anything constructive with just anger. In a sermon entitled Loving Your Enemies, King states, now, first let's deal with this question, which is the practical question. How do you go about loving your enemies? And then he answers, he says, I think the first thing is this. In order to love your enemies, you must begin by analyzing self. And I'm sure that seems strange to you that I start out telling you this morning that you love your enemies by beginning with the look at yourself. Now, King also stated that love is the only force that is capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. When we have this as our goal, to widen our circles and to see our enemies transformed into friends, we are actually living as the beloved community. So when we understand, as King did, that the love community is the end goal for all of our campaigns and efforts for peace and justice, then we can better plan and implement effective campaigns and actions that will continually move us towards the creation of the beloved community. Whatever you might call it, that is what it is. So keeping our eyes on the prize of the beloved community reminds us to treat all of life, be they friend or foe, with courtesy, compassion, with kindness, and it really prevents us from being seduced into the ends justify the means thinking, which ultimately undermines our efforts and delays genuine and lasting progress. So when we ask, who is in our circle? And what is keeping others out of our circle? We are really at that point ready to remove the hindrances at our ramps that others may enter in to our circle of influence. Now, the third question that I want to ask you is, how do we remain engaged with those with whom we strongly disagree? Now, this is really a question about tension, and it must be addressed if there's to be a forward movement in the beloved community composed of people with different backgrounds and views. Now, years ago, I was actually acquainted with an effort to live as the beloved community. But to me, it failed to address the issues of substance. The reason why I suspect is that it really lacked tension. Nobody was angry about anything. Everybody was lovey-dovey, and nobody wanted to say anything that might upset anyone. Now, while that might sound great, it's really superficial. In his letter from the Birmingham jail, King said, my citing the creation of tension as part of the work of the nonviolent resistor may sound rather shocking. He said, but I must confess that I'm not afraid of the word tension. I have earnestly opposed violent tension, but there is a type of constructive, nonviolent tension which is necessary for growth. Just as Socrates felt that it was necessary to create a tension in the mind so that individuals could rise from the bondage of myths and half-truths to the unfettered realm of creative analysis and objective appraisal, so must we see the need for non-violent gadflies to create the kind of tension in society that will help men rise from the dark depths of prejudice and racism to the majestic heights of understanding and brotherhood. Now that sounds pretty real. In that same letter, he also said, I've heard many ministers say, those are social issues which the gospel has no real concern. And he says, I've watched many churches commit themselves to a completely otherworldly religion, which makes a strange, unbiblical distinction between body and soul, between the sacred and the secular. And we don't want to do that. In order for change to happen, there must exist also an urgency. Now, we are familiar with the present, even if it's not such a desirable present, but we're not anxious for an unknown tomorrow. In fact, people tend to hate change. Many will say they desire change, just not now. There's often a tension when change is happening at the pace of change. So King not only had to address all these issues, he had to address apathy and complacency, but he had to address the fear and the hate. And there was a genuine opposition to not only the methods, but the goals of King. James Baldwin said, I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hatred so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with the pain. So my last question then was, again, I'll repeat it. How do we remain engaged with those with whom we strongly disagree? Many choose not to. Some go out and join their like-minded group. But those who remain engaged are able to bring forth that which is sweet and desirable, lacking revenge or bitterness. They become mountains that tower above the landscape, and they leave a legacy for others to follow. God bless you.
Thank you so much for that, Pastor George. A lot of stuff to think about. So I know that not everyone thinks of comments immediately, so we wanted to give you some time to digest, especially with these particular questions. So I'm going to put them up on the screen. I will also put them in the chat momentarily. So the questions are, what are the issues today that diminish the dignity of individuals that we are reluctant to address? Question 2 is, who is in your circle, and what is keeping other people out? And how do we remain engaged with those whom we strongly disagree? So in a moment, you're going to see an invitation to a breakout room. I have created these randomly, so I do not have control, nor do I know who you know and who you don't know. You will be invited to accept that invitation. There should be around 5 or 6 participants per room. Let me know if that's not a case and only 2 people are in there and we can assign you. But we wanted to give you some time to discuss this with one another, to ruminate and mull over these ideas, and definitely give that space for the people who need that time to put their thoughts together. So happy discussing. We are going to come back to the larger group and have a question and answer time based on the questions that you all have, and the ideas, time of sharing of what you all came up with. So happy discussing, and we'll be in there for about 10 minutes. I will send you reminders of the timestamps and how much time you have left. So you will be called back. Do not worry. Have fun talking. All right. So the invitations just went out. Let me know if there's any issues. hello, and welcome back to the big room. I'm going to assume that conversation was amazing since you all waited till the last second to rejoin. So I'm hoping to continue that conversation here, but there is one more piece of the presentation tonight that I wanted to share with you all, and that is we are going to work together to make a piece of community art, and that involves you. So these were the questions that you were discussing before. However, if I can, my computer just wigged out on me. My apologies. We have a fourth question for you all to consider if my computer will behave with me. There we go. We're not going to do it in presentation mode, but the question is, how will we commit to building the beloved community this year? We're hoping to revisit this in future TIG meetings because this isn't just an idea for one night, but hopefully an idea of building the beloved community that can take us through the year this year as a focus. So what we are asking of you is to come up with your commitment, something that you can do to help build up these ideas that we've been talking about, whether it's taking down a barrier for someone entering your group, whether it is working with someone you very much disagree with, or other elements that we've been talking about. So once you have created your commitment, if you look at the bottom of your screen for most of you, and you'll see the little bubble that says chat, we invite you to put your commitments in there. And what's going to happen is I'm going to work behind the scenes and put them into what is called a word cloud. And so we're going to see what it looks like when we put them all together, put a bunch of emphasis words together, and see the things that we're agreeing on and we're going to work on together, the things that other people are committing to do. So from now until the end of the time, feel free to put your commitments into the chat. But while people are doing that and I'm working to put the word cloud together, I open it up for some question and answer and some comment times. We would love to know what you all talked about in each of your breakout rooms. So I'm going to turn it over to you all. What did you all talk about, and what was compelling? What was some of the ideas and the comments that people had? Feel free to unmute yourself at this point. That's where that mute button comes in handy. Feel free to unmute yourself and let us know what some of your conversations dealt with. Ooh, so some of the commitments that are coming in is supporting and working with Afghan refugees. Another person is committing to attend TIG meetings, listening more openly with those with other opinions. Those are all great. Any other comments? Any questions for George, Pastor George, to elaborate on some of his thinking? This is your time to continue engaging with some of the things shared.
This is Paul Bayless. I guess I'd like to ask Pastor George, how do you go about expanding your circle? Is there a mechanism or a way, or how do you expand the community?
Thank you, Paul, for that question. There are several ways. Again, it can be, where is your focus, of what has God maybe exposed to you, brought to your mind, brought to your heart. For instance, you heard someone commented about refugees. You might go and say, I'm going to volunteer in a program that serves refugees. You may say, I think all these people coming over here from Afghanistan, they should have stayed in their country. They didn't like us. And then once you actually meet the individuals, okay? See, I can hate everybody anonymously. But once I get close enough to you where I can touch you, where I can look you in your eyes, where I could see that, we're more alike than we're different, then it's harder for me to just want to exclude you. And I would say it's natural for us to have certain circles, but for us to expand it, we do have to take steps such as exposing ourselves to other cultures, other lifestyles, other people groups.
Great, thank you.
So one of my questions is, if I can jump in here, I know that there are some topics that I'm really good at discussing because I can do it in a non-emotional state. I can be level-headed. And then there's other topics where I cannot do it rationally or justifiably. Do you have any advice of how do we talk to people when we struggle with being that calm and level-headed and loving to other people? There's the people who are different but close to us, and they're the ones that are different and make us angry. So any advice there?
Yeah, that's the tension. Okay,
Mhm.
that is the tension, that when you feel the tension, your natural reaction is, I don't want this. I'm just going to be quiet. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to go back to my space where I feel comfortable. Okay. What you have to do at times is you just have to hang in there. You have to be willing to be misunderstood sometimes. People wonder about your motives. They'll think you're there for some ulterior motives. You're trying to gain something out of it. You're getting paid to do something that you're not getting paid to do. But you just have to be willing to be misunderstood. I will use this as an example. As an African American that lives in a predominantly white nation, we have a lot of exposure to the majority culture. Okay. If I drive across country, I go through a lot of communities that have very few blacks in them. Or if there's a black community, oftentimes you don't know where it's at. So you're interacting a lot more with whites. And some blacks, they call it, they have two languages. They have two ways of speaking. You speak one way when you're around your family and your friends, but then when you're around a predominantly white culture, you talk another way. It's just something you learn. And so in the same way that others have had to do that, you have to sort of be willing to say, I'm willing to learn little bits and pieces. It's going to be a process. You're not going to say, hey, I've been in this situation around a group of Afghan refugees for one day. I understand everything about their culture now. You're not going to do that. You have to be willing to be misunderstood in order to get there. Can I share one that happened in our group? I had two women that were in our group, and one of the things we talked about was what happened down in Texas. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the comment was made that I don't think I could forgive a person that did that. Okay. And my question was, what would drive somebody to do that? Do you think that person had a lot of Jewish people in his circle? And the answer is probably not. Jews were probably vilified as being non-people. They're the enemy. And so if we want more of what we got, we keep doing what we're doing. If we want something different, we have to be willing to include in our environment other people. And I'm going to promise you, you'll find that some of the people that you might have been really concerned or even fearful of talking to, you'll find out there's nothing scary about them. They're just people.
Yeah. You make me think of a quote that I've been hearing a lot lately. That's what got us here will not get you there.
Yes.
What got us to this point, more of the same isn't going to get us to where we want to go, which means we do have to pivot, we have to change, so. So a few more of the commitments that have been continuing to come in is work on expanding my circle and keeping biases in check, helping a congregation develop a greater understanding of anti-oppression, building new relationships with people who don't look like me, engaging more actively with Troy Interfaith. I hope to see you in February. Volunteering in a variety of organizations, definitely want to expand circles. I'm hearing that one again and again. And ask more, tell me more about that questions. So a lot about questions and engaging. I guess another question could be like, for those wanting to make a circle bigger, there's almost a question. Can be for you, Pastor George, and it can be for other people, is have you found good ways and like places to go where people don't look like you, sound like you, who are outside your circles? Like, where have people gone intentionally? Because I think has to be a part of intentionality to break out of our circles. Where have we gone where we find people outside of our circles? Feel free to be taken or go off mute or add it in the chat, either way. Pastor George, you shared about driving through places that don't look like you, sounding different. Do you have anything to add about going intentionally, or advice of where maybe some of the people here could go intentionally, knowing that we are people of Troy, largely?
Well, I would say that most of the time, someone once did a group, Dr. Brenda McNeil at Seattle Pacific University. And what she did was she had people to group by different things. So we're sort of like, maybe race becomes a major one. Male or female might be another one. But she would say, if you're the oldest child, over here, if you're the only child over here, she had different ways that she could get us to begin to see that we actually belong to a lot of other groups. And so sometimes some of these other groups that we belong in have connections to other groups that we do not feel so comfortable, or we do not feel that we belong in. And they can be, in a sense, your ambassadors to over there. So I have a friend who is a veteran and he is Vietnamese, and I want to know more about the Vietnamese community. Well, he potentially could be a source of that. I mean, I got to cultivate a relationship with him first, but if I want to know more about that culture, then that is an opportunity.
Any other thoughts from folks who have intentionally gone out of their way to meet people? I do think it's good to point out the layeredness of all of our identities. Where while sometimes we tend to like choose some of the like major ones that are very apparent, all of our identities are very layered.
Well, if you're faith-based, I say you can go to different types of churches, not just your own. If people are having events, or even if there are events on Zoom, visit them and start there.
I think that puts some of the onus on the pastor. Thank you, Dr. Sheila. But that means our pastors have to not be jealous when people go to other churches as well, or different faith services. We have to let the people out.
Well, we're the body of Christ, and the body's just not one place. And so we let our people grow. If we want them to grow, we should be encouraging them to, at least, like I said, if it's Zoom because of the COVID right now, you can still check out different people. If the people are committed to where they are, they're going to be committed. So, but we should allow people to grow.
Yeah.
When you were talking before about people that you disagree with strongly, one of the books that we are going to be reading at my church is called God and Race. And I've only read the first beginning of it, but they point out that if you hold up the book and ask somebody to describe what they see, they will be describing the back cover while you are seeing the front cover. It's the point of view that you have, and you need to be accepting that that person may not see the thing that you see.
Mhm. That's a beautiful illustration. Thank you. All right, with a few minutes remaining, I'm going to encourage you, if you have anything else that you want to commit to for the year of ways that you want to help build the beloved community and be willing to wade into that tension there, I invite you to keep putting it in the chat. In a moment or two, I'm going to hit export and we're going to have our image to share with you all. I guess one of my last questions for you, Pastor George, is there's a lot, you talked about building tension, and there's a lot of people who are tension averse, that the tension builds and they just want to like nope out and go like, not for me. Because there's a worry of offense, and that or a worry of being impolite. There's a lot of worry. So how do you get people used to that feeling of tension? Is there a way that you found working in yourself or working with other people that you can kind of calm the anxiety and the nervousness around that tension?
I like sports, and one thing I always like to watch is when it's game time. How do the athletes come out? And they have a lot of adrenaline. They have a lot of energy, and they want to have an outlet for that energy. And so I think we need the energy that comes from the tension. We need the energy to keep us alert, to where when I'm around someone, I don't know how this person is going to react to me. Are they going to welcome me? Are they going to push me away? Are they going to attack me? Are they going to join with me? I don't really know. And so I'm looking for whatever sign that I can see. And I think we need that if we are to change. Like I said, if you're happy with everything the way it is, and I know a lot of people are. A lot of people like, this is the best we've ever had it. Why would anybody complain? I could tell you why. I watch the news too often, and I see little kids getting shot. I see prisons, that have high percentages of certain population groups. I hear about Native American women who are assaulted and murdered, and there's no justice for them, or people who have high chemical waste dumps in their neighborhoods and in their backyard, and nobody does anything. Bad drinking water. So I know, as good as it is, there are still issues that need to be addressed. And there's this one part that I think that the tension is because most likely there's a certain amount of anger. Okay. Martin Luther King said the anger all by itself is no good. It's not productive. You have to channel that anger. You got to do something with that anger. And so the ideal of being engaged and maintaining that tension is using that anger, is using that area where you feel uncomfortable, and you're basically you're bringing that back to someone else, and you're saying, I want you to feel some of that tension. I want you to own it as much as the people that have to endure these situations have to endure it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Pat in the chat says, we need to have strong support systems for ourselves before we can extend ourselves outwards with others we don't agree with and be able to relate. Thank you for that. And I think that goes back to what Pastor George, you were saying, is like sometimes wading into the tension means you have to start with yourself. You got to get your own house in order before you can go out and deal with other people. But one last thing, I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege just to give a piece of advice that was once given to me. I was talking or trying to put together a service and went to a friend of mine, Pastor Fernando Rodriguez, who's now out in Colorado. but I was so worried because it was supposed to be an international service. I wanted to be respectful. I didn't want to offend. And I was kind of trying to do that dance. And he stopped me dead in my tracks and said, "You are going to make mistakes. You know that, right? At some point, Chris, you are going to offend someone. You're going to step on someone's toes. You're not going to get it right. And that's okay. I'm still going to be your friend." And that kind of encouragement changed the world when you realize that in walking into the tension, you're going to get it wrong. But knowing that you have a community that will stand by you and allow you to make those mistakes is very powerful. And so I'm hoping that somewhat is this space where we're kind of learning together and doing the messy part together, because it's not, wading into the tension is not always clean or easy work.
That's a good word.
So it is 2 past the hour. We do try to make things on time. So at the end of it all, I want to reveal to you the word cloud we have created together. These are some of our community commitments. I will say I couldn't put the full sentences in, so I drew out the keywords. And so this is what we are committing to for this year. A lot of building relationships and asking questions, listen more, listening, things like bias checks and tell me more, and expanding, take time, and anti-oppression, welcoming, and we have that tension in there. And at the center of it all is TIG, also known as Troy Interfaith. So we're hoping to plaster this image a few places. We are going to refer to it at later events. We're going to ask you how you are with your commitments, because accountability is one of the best things to help us stick to our commitments and stay to the work of both wading into the tension and expanding our circles and removing our barriers. So thank you all so much for joining in. It was a joy to be with you all. And thank you for taking the time to be vulnerable and discuss. And thank you so much, Pastor George, for helping us wade into that tension and think about the things. It was such a joy to have you with us. And so this is another time, if you have that unmute button, I invite you to unmute and give celebrations and hellos and thank yous. This is the end of our program. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the week and are finding ways to expand circles and ask questions and listen more. So thank you all and good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good
God
night.
bless you.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Good to
God
see
bless
everyone.
you.
Uh-huh.
Thank
Bye.
you, Reverend Dr. Sheila.
Good night.
Good night.
God bless you.
All right. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.